So upressing is basically the process of taking a low-res image or video and turning it into a high-res image or video. And there's a lot more that goes into it than simply taking an image and scaling up the pixels, because whenever you take an image and you just scale up the pixels, you get pixelation and artifacts. And that's really challenging because it just takes away from the overall quality of your project. This week, essentially every video is going to have upressing be a core part of the setup process, but I wanted to take an entire video to really go into a lot of detail about how to properly upres your assets, as in the future videos, I'm going to go through it much more quickly. So the first thing that I want to address is kind of an elephant in the room here. And the elephant in the room is the tools that I'm going to show you for upressing are actually a little expensive. So the image upresser is $99 and at the time of this recording. And the video upresser is $250. So that's a lot of money. And I get that that's a lot of money. And so there are some alternative tools that you can use. One of them, we've talked about it in a previous video, is this free tool called BigJPEG. And essentially you can upload an image and output a higher quality image that uses AI to fix some of the pixelation and artifacting. It's not as good as some of the paid tools that I will be showing you how to use, but you can use it for free. And Runway has a tool that allows you to upres video as well. Again, it's not as good, but it is there, so you can always upres your footage using Runway. So let's take a look at some images here. So you can download the assets to follow along with me if you want to. And we will start with images. So obviously Midjourney typically gives us images. So we can start with a Midjourney image. And inside this folder, you'll see there are the upresed images and videos. I'm going to go ahead and just delete those upresed versions just for demonstration purposes. You can keep them and kind of compare and contrast the original and the upresed version. So this is our image from Midjourney here. Now Midjourney by default only gives you, I believe it's about 1400 pixels wide whenever you are using the 16:9 format. So that's not wide enough to be HD or 4K. And certainly that's not large enough if we wanted to have extra pixels for going in and doing like visual effects work and some of the stuff we're going to do this week and next week. So this isn't going to work. So we need to have more quality here. So let me go ahead and I'm going to import this image into Gigapixel AI. And Gigapixel is a tool developed by Topaz Labs, and it's really good about upressing images using AI in a realistic way. So let me zoom in here so we can kind of see what's going on. Kind of zoom in much, much closer. So you can see this is the pixelation. So if we were to expand this image, this 1400 pixel image, to a large format, it would have all these jagged edges, and that would look pretty bad. There's no like the detail, and her dress is completely messed up. Over here, the texturing on this like rock structure is really, really bad. This is like a weird like alien artifact, but it was messed up. So you can see that it's pretty bad. But if we let Gigapixel do its thing for just a couple of seconds, you can see that right away it introduces some realistic sharpness into the scene, and just overall it's looking much, much better. You know, for example, like these rock details over here, there's nothing, and then it really smooths it out. So it's a really great tool. Let me show you how to use it from scratch here. So the first thing you need to do is go up here and adjust the scale. So by default, it's going to be set to this scale button, and it's going to want you to select one of these multipliers. I don't find that to be as useful as going into the width and height here and just simply changing it to whatever you need it to be. So for example, if we were working on a 4K composition, I actually would want to get more than just 4K pixels so that I could have a little leeway in case I want to do like some camera shake and just other image and scene enhancement projects. So it actually maybe do about 5,000 pixels wide. So it takes just a little bit of time. Again, just a few seconds to kind of give you a preview of what your overall image is going to look like. Great. So the next thing that it's going to do is by default, it is going to try to guess what type of image this is. a lot of times, especially if you have a lot of like stylized elements in your scene, it may think that it is an art and CG scene, which is not right. And it will usually create edges that are a little too harsh. So, you know, again, this is a cinematic still, and it's trying to simulate an actual cinema camera. And with a cinema camera comes a lot of like fog in edges. So for example, edges will become a little softer whenever there's points of contrast because there's just a little bit of like some lens bleeding that happens along edges. And of course, things aren't going to be super sharp. They'll be sharp if they're shot in high res, but they're not going to be crazy sharp to where it looks unnatural. And you can see with the CG one, let me zoom in on these kind of bulbs over here. It'll kind of illustrate what I'm talking about. So these are like glass bulbs, but you can see like, these areas of contrast are like too much. So make sure that you don't have that CG button selected. What I honestly like rolling with the most is just the standard. I think standard does a really good job. So the next thing we want to look at are the setting adjustments. So right now we have our setting, the suppressed noise is up a little bit and the fixed compression is up a little bit. I'm going to tell you a little secret. I actually don't like increasing any of these settings. The main reason is exactly what I was talking about with these glass orbs. Whenever you start turning up the suppressed noise and remove blur, the fixed compression, a lot of the realistic details begin to get lost. So right now, this looks like an image of like a really cool alien glass orb. But if I was to adjust these settings, and let me just like turn all these settings up a lot so we can kind of compare and contrast here. You see how unrealistic it becomes? Like it has like these harsh edges, the contrast looks way too much. Like the background, it looks like it was like rendered in like an old like Photoshop filter or something like that. So generally, I honestly just like turning these all the way off. We don't really need a lot of those compression artifacts fixed because they do add to the realism. And so let me let this run real quick. Okay, so now this is the realistic image that we have here. And let me scrub in here. I'll get closer to her face. Let that run. And you can see that on her head here, there's even that glow, the contrast glow from the background to the foreground, which looks pretty good. So it did a really good job. And if they were facing the camera, you could turn on face recovery. I do find that face recovery does distort the faces a little bit. And then there's a gamma correction setting that you can turn on as well. So I'm actually pretty happy with this image. It did a really good job. I really don't feel like there's too many other things that I would want to fix here. So what I'm going to do now is just hit save image, and you can bulk save your images. So if I was to add in another image, I would just add it to the queue here. So let's take a look at formats here. So there's all the formats that you would expect. If you're wanting the maximum quality possible, using a TIFF or a DNG is the way to go. And then if you have transparent backgrounds and you want that transparency to be retained, you can select PNG as well. So I'll save this as a TIFF here. We can keep the default compression and the bit depth at 16-bit. The file name you can change, to whatever you want, which is alien scene. And you can pick a location that saves to. And then you just hit save. And it only takes a few seconds for an image. It's really impressive, honestly, how fast it takes to save these files. So let's go back over to our folder here where I just saved this scene. You can see that because it's a TIFF format, it's like 33 megabytes. So that is pretty big. My hope is if you're working on a professional video editing project that you would have a hard drive or an external hard drive that's big enough to facilitate all these images. But if space is a concern to you, you can use PNG formats or a JPEG format if it doesn't have like graphics and things like that. Let's take a look at all the high-res details here. I think this looks pretty darn good. And I like how it retained the lens quality and it really retained that kind of cinematic look to this image.